Hi, my name's Jason Moore. I'm director and professor of the Institute for Biomedical Informatics at the University of Pennsylvania. I've been a Twitter user almost since the beginning, since 2008. I was a fairly early adopter of Twitter. And as you can see on this screen, I've had 40,000 tweets since 2008 and have accumulated over 27,000 followers. And what I thought I would do today is share some of my tips for science communication via Twitter. And I have 20 tips to share with you today. And if you're interested in science communication, you can follow the SciComm hashtag on Twitter. And I am at MoreJH on Twitter. So for those of you that are new to Twitter, what is Twitter? Twitter can be described as a micro blogging or social networking, social media site. And when I first heard about Twitter back probably in 2007, Twitter was founded in 2006. I think I first really learned about it in 2007 from some colleagues. And I remember it initially being described to me as a site for letting the world know what you were doing, right? So at that time, Twitter was limited to 140 characters. And the idea was that you would just say what you were doing. I'm at the grocery store, I'm in the library. And I remember thinking at the time that that sounded interesting, but probably not for me. I didn't really want to tell the world what I was doing at every minute of the day. But in 2008, Twitter started to gain some popularity, and I started to see the value as more of a microblogging, letting the world know about the scientific things I was doing or other interesting things that I ran across. So that's when I signed up. Twitter has over 300 million active users, and in 2019 brought in $3.5 billion of revenue. It's listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It's free to use and it's easy to use. And the image on this slide shows the Twitter headquarters in San Francisco. So this is what a tweet looks like. And this is a tweet I did on April 29th, 2020. About the race for coronavirus vaccines, a graphical guide. And I thought I would use this just to highlight the anatomy of a tweet. So at the top, you have your name and your username. That's how you're recognized on Twitter. I'm, again, at MoreJH. There's the main text of your tweet. All of the text is limited now to 280 characters, which is an increase from the original 140 when Twitter started. You can have web links, and often people include what are called hashtags, which are denoted by a pound sign and usually a keyword, which helps people find your tweets based on keywords that they're interested in. And then you can, of course, include an image, which helps the tweet get noticed and can provide some additional content. At the bottom are some action buttons. You can reply to the tweet if you want to make a comment about it. You can retweet it, which is a way of reposting it to the world. If you want to, if you like the tweet or think it's important, you can let the world know that by retweeting. You can like the tweet. There are some actions you can take. You can send a direct message to the tweeter if you're friends with them. You can add the tweet to your bookmarks, or you can copy the link to the tweet if you want to, for example, post it on another social media site like Facebook. There's also an analytics button that can give you an idea of the total number of impressions or the people that might have seen the tweet, and the total engagements, the number of people who actually interacted with the tweet in some way. So why use Twitter? If you're a scientist or a researcher, science communication is part of our job. It's an important requirement of what we do to let the world know about the science we've done, its implications, its strengths and limitations, et cetera. So Twitter can be an effective mechanism of science communication. You can use it to build a scientific network, which might be important for promotion. For example, establishing a national and international reputation is part of the criteria that's used when a professor goes up for promotion. It can help your work get noticed. It can increase the number of downloads of the papers you published. It can improve altmetrics and citations, as I'll show in a minute. Twitter can provide feedback about your work. You could tweet a paper or some work that you've done, and people will comment on it and provide feedback, some positive, some negative, and that might be helpful to you. And you can certainly express opinions and give feedback yourself about other people's work, and therefore establish a scientific dialogue on Twitter. Having an active Twitter feed can help attract students and postdocs to your lab. So that's a very positive use of Twitter, and of course helps you stay informed. There's a never-ending stream of scientific information and news and other items that might be of interest to you. And as I mentioned, Twitter can help drive up the impact of your work. This is a paper that just came out in June of 2020, published in the Annals of Thoracic Surgery, and the title is, "Does Tweeting Improve Citations? 1-Year Results from the TSSMN Prospective Randomized Trial." The TSSMN is the Thoracic Surgery Social Media Network, which is at TSSMN on Twitter. And what they did was they randomized 112 articles to a group that was tweeted via the at TSSMN Twitter account, and those that were not tweeted. And then after a year, they looked at the change in the number of citations, the altmetric score, et cetera, and they found that those articles that were tweeted did have a significant increase in impact. So just one study, but that's certainly consistent with my experience with Twitter over the last 12 years. Now, there are obviously benefits to using Twitter, but there can be some risks as well. It can open you up to harassment and threats. And yes, people do say mean and nasty things to you or about you on Twitter, depending on how active you are and the kinds of things you're tweeting about. It can open you to hacking if you're tweeting personal information that, for example, might relate to some passwords that you're using. That's a way for hackers to get information about you. It's easy to be misunderstood or misquoted on Twitter because of the limitations, both in terms of the number of characters that you can use, but also just sometimes your comments could be taken out of context because they're contained in a tweet in text form. You might see negative or offensive tweets. Twitter is wide open and people say all kinds of things that you might find offensive. Old tweets can come back to haunt you. You might say something at one time and later that tweet could be taken out of context and be used against you. It can be distracting or a waste of time. Twitter never stops. It's always there throwing information at you, and you can easily get distracted and get caught up in following things that are maybe not directly relevant to your career or your scientific endeavors. Twitter, if you're active on Twitter, can call unwanted attention to you. Sometimes there's a benefit to flying just under the radar. You want people to notice your work, but you might not want them to notice it so much that they are unduly negative or critical. And Twitter could alienate future paper or grant reviewers. If there are people, scientists reviewing your work, might have formed a negative impression about you on Twitter, and then that could reflect in future paper or grant reviews. So all these things are important to keep in mind as you dive into using Twitter. Now, before I get into my 20 tips, I wanted to point out a very influential hashtag, Black in the Ivory. And this is a hashtag that is used by the Black community to discuss and present their experiences of being Black in academia. And this is a very timely hashtag, and I have learned so much from reading the tweets of Black scientists and academics and hearing about their experiences, their concerns, their viewpoints as we address systemic and institutional racism in the United States and elsewhere around the world. And this is an example of a tweet I saw that caught my eye. This is from Kayla Wheeler, who's an assistant professor at Xavier University in Cincinnati in Ohio. And she tweeted, "My white and most of my non-Black people of color colleagues get to spend the summer writing, researching, and relaxing, while Black faculty and staff are being asked to solve a 500-year-old system during a pandemic so their employers don't end up in the Chronicle for the wrong reasons." So, I think this is probably eye-opening to many to hear about the experiences of our Black colleagues. So definitely well worth the read, and this is a hashtag you should definitely follow and keep track of. Okay, so now on to my 20 tips for becoming a Twitter pro and for being an effective communicator of your science on Twitter. Now, there's the age-old question, if a tree falls in the forest and you're not there to hear it, does it actually make a sound? And you could say the same about tweets. And so a good portion of these 20 tips are about building a following of people who will pay attention to your tweets. So my first tip is provide interesting content. People are more likely to pay attention to your Twitter account and your Twitter feed if you are giving them interesting things, things they didn't know about, things that help them or help their careers or their science. Here's an example of two tweets from earlier this summer. Both I thought were interesting, and I thought others would be interested. The first one is about Fitbit data showing that we're sleeping better during the COVID-19 lockdown. And the second one is about a COVID paper that I saw about pandemic research exceptionalism. And I thought both of these were equally interesting, but as you can see, one got a lot more tweets and likes, the bottom one, than the top one. And so as you think about how to construct tweets, and this is something I'm continuously refining, is thinking about when I see something interesting, will other people find it interesting? How do I present it in an interesting way? And so something for you to think about as you decide what content to share and how to share it. One of my big tips is to include images. I think tweets that include images are more often to be liked and retweeted than tweets that don't provide images. And choose your images carefully. Try to choose an image that's going to catch people's eye, that's going to tell them something about the content of your tweet. Here are two examples of tweets that I did that got a lot of attention and included images that I thought were interesting and relevant to the tweets themselves. Include several hashtags. Again, hashtags are keywords that people can use to search for tweets that they might be interested in. And I usually include 2 or 3, sometimes 4 hashtags. Again, thinking about what audiences do I think my tweet is most relevant to. And it's important to know the right hashtags to use for your community. And one of the best ways is to explore a lot of tweets and look at what hashtags people are using in your community or your particular scientific discipline. And this is a tweet that I did about an editorial that I published on artificial intelligence, and I included the hashtag artificial intelligence, which is a very active hashtag for AI. I also included the data science hashtag, which overlaps with AI, and the healthcare hashtag, which was relevant to this particular editorial that I published. Use day-specific hashtags. Each day of the week has a number of hashtags that are commonly used by people, and it can help highlight a particular tweet and direct it to a community of people that are paying attention to the particular day of week. This is a fun hashtag that I like to use. Every once in a while, I'd like to tweet about fossils because I find them interesting. And there is a Fossil Friday hashtag for paleontologists and other people interested in fossils. I often, get a handful of likes, sometimes more, or retweets from fossil things that I tweet on Friday. So I usually try to do one fossil tweet per week on Fossil Friday. I don't make every week, but and then here's another interesting one, which is even a little bit more specific within the context of fossils, is Trilobite Tuesday for people that are interested in trilobites. And I've done, maybe 5 or 10 Trilobite Tuesday tweets over the last few years. So that's kind of a fun hashtag as well. And there are tons of these day specific hashtags, and you'll see these used often in my tweets. Time of day can be important. Tweet in the mornings. Here's a study that showed that tweeting between 7 a.m. and 12 p.m. in the morning hours, that those tweets get a lot more likes and retweets than tweets at other times of the day. And also certain days can also be better than others. I personally find Monday to be, that my Monday tweets get retweeted more than tweets in the later part of the week. Now, to build up a loyal following, you need to provide good content, and I would say frequent content. I try to tweet about 5 to 10 times per day. And if you look at my number of tweets, 40,000 tweets over 12 years, if you do the math, that's an average of about 10 tweets per day. Some days I tweet more, some days I tweet less, but on average about 10 times per day. And it's important to have that good, rich content going out frequently so people get used to seeing your name, your Twitter account, and are more likely to follow you because you provide good content. And that's how you drive up your follower base. Scheduled tweets. As I said, I tweet in the mornings. And if you look, you'll see, usually 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10 tweets every morning from me. But people think that I'm sitting there actively tweeting in the morning, and sometimes I do, but usually I'm busy in meetings and doing work and don't have time to tweet. So what I do is I schedule my tweets ahead of time when I do have time. Usually on the weekends, I'll schedule a set of tweets to go out during the week. Or in the evenings or early mornings when I have time to do social media. If I see something interesting, I'll queue up a tweet to go out the next morning when I think is most likely to get noticed. I use TweetDeck to manage my Twitter activity, which I'll mention again a little bit later. But that has the nice feature of being able to schedule tweets. So you can set a tweet to go out on a specific date and a specific time. I've even queued up tweets to go out 6 months or a year in advance on a very specific day that I know is going to come up if I see something interesting. So here's an example of 2 tweets that I had scheduled to go out at the 7 to 8 o'clock time frame on June 16th of 2020. Follow at least 10 users per day. One of the ways you drive up your follower base is by actually following people. And I try to follow about 10 people a day and find that some of those people follow me back. And that's how you drive up one of the ways to drive up your follower base in addition to providing good content. Here's an example of some people that I followed at a particular point in time. And out of these, I think there are about 8 or 9 people listed here. 2 of them ended up following me back. So 2 out of 10, 20% hit rate on follows. And eventually, you build up a bunch of people that are not following you. And every once in a while, I go through and try to weed those out and unfollow them unless there's somebody important that I really want to follow. And it's more important for me to follow them than it is for them to follow me. Limit tweets of your own work. You don't want to be seen as being too self-promoting on Twitter. That can turn people off if they feel like you're just using Twitter to promote your own work. So what I try to do is, like I said, provide interesting content. I would say about maybe 9 out of 10 tweets are about other people's work, other interesting things I see, and about 1 out of 10 or less are my own tweets. But it's okay to, this is part of the point of this, is to communicate your own scientific work, and you definitely want to tweet about your papers or accomplishments, promotions, awards that you win. All of those kinds of things I think are fair game, and you definitely want to tweet about those. You want to let the world know what you're doing and the great things that you've accomplished, but you don't want it to be every tweet. In fact, I think you want it to be a minority of tweets. Keep it light, fun, and positive. It's easy to be critical on Twitter. It's easy to slip into a pattern of being negative and complaining about things. And in general, people don't like that. There are Twitter accounts that make a point of being a curmudgeon or being a kind of negative, critical person. And sometimes, that works for some people, but in general, I think it's kind of a turnoff to be too negative. So keep it light, keep it fun. I try to tweet cartoons and fun things I see, hobby type things often, and just to lighten the mood and let people know that there is a lighter side to you and to your Twitter feed. And I found that these lighter tweets get noticed and get retweeted quite frequently, which can build up your follower base. As you can see, here are 4 cartoons that I tweeted this summer, and all of them got noticed quite substantially. In fact, the one in the bottom right on types of research errors got over 128 likes and over 56 retweets and 4 comments. So that's a pretty good hit rate. I would avoid controversial topics. I try to, if your point of a Twitter account is to advance science communication, your scientific career, then you probably don't want to be political or controversial, because that's going to turn people off and potentially alienate, again, your paper reviewers, your grant reviewers, your promotion reviewers from you. So I try to avoid controversial topics whenever possible. It's very infrequent that I have a political tweet. Here are 2 I would say are a little bit more controversial that I did within the last few months. And again, these are very rare. I probably only have a handful of tweets like this in a year. The one on the left is a political tweet. And again, it's a little bit on the light side, right? Rather than being overtly offensive or to some. This is Sarah Cooper, who's a comedian, and she does Donald Trump lip syncing to things that he said, and they're quite funny and humorous. But this does have a political edge to it and might turn off some of my followers. So I try not to do too many of these. But once in a while, I think it's okay. And people that follow my Twitter feed know that I'm not overtly political or controversial. The one on the right was pointing out some COVID-19 misinformation from the state of Georgia, and a visualization that they did that was not accurate and actually overtly meant to mislead the public. And so I made a point of highlighting this kind of really more as a scientific data visualization, what not to do, but also it's a bit political because it's taking a little bit of a dig at the state of Georgia and their misinformation campaign. Give credit in tweets. This is really important. This was an editorial I published in Extreme Tech magazine, and gave some compliments to the editor in chief, Jamie Lendino. And so I did HT@JLendino. HT means hat tip. So that's saying, hey, thank you, or acknowledging a person. So, you know, it's a nice thing to do. For example, if you're going to post somebody's research paper, not one of your own papers, on Twitter, and some of the authors have Twitter accounts, it's nice to give them a hat tip and say, hey, great paper by these people, and acknowledge their Twitter accounts. Avoid Twitter conversations. It's really easy to get sucked into a back and forth with one or more people on Twitter about a particular topic. And I used to do this from time to time, and every time I came away feeling stressed and anxious and regretting getting involved in Twitter conversations. Because it's easy to get misquoted or misunderstood. It's really hard to get your point across and to be influential in these Twitter conversations. Many of them end up devolving into somewhat negative territory, and so you can easily get sucked into a rabbit hole, and not only does it eat up a lot of time, but you might say things that you regret later. And once things are in the Twitter sphere, they're pretty permanent and can be discovered by Google and other sources later. Ask friends for retweets and something called Follow Friday. Because I have such a big Twitter following, I have people that contact me from time to time and say, hey, I just tweeted a paper of mine, could you retweet it? Because, you know, I know people are more likely to see it from your Twitter account than mine. So both ask and offer to retweet papers and tweets from other people. It's a nice thing to do, and it helps out your friends and colleagues. And also there's something on Twitter called Follow Friday, which is another one of these day specific hashtags, either Follow Friday spelled out or FF for short. And so here's a Follow Friday that I did for one of my informatics colleagues who had a poll that they wanted to highlight. So I'm calling attention to her and her poll, but also indicating to my followers that, hey, here's somebody you might want to follow that I think has interesting tweets. Don't tweet personal information. Again, back to hacking being a risk. This is a very real risk. If you're tweeting personal interests, personal information, hackers can look at that and sometimes figure out what your passwords are for your social media sites or your email or your work-related accounts. And this is a very real concern, and this is a mechanism by which hackers steal passwords, is by looking at people's social media accounts and the things, you know, their kids' names, their favorite movies, their favorite actors, you know, all of those kinds of things that we sometimes use as passwords can be derived from our social media accounts by hackers. So just be careful. I think it's good to express opinions if you do it in a very conscientious, lighthearted way. You know, here are some opinions that I expressed in tweets. One was a little bit edgy. The one on the left is a bit edgy, targeted at Microsoft, and the fact that when we use the letters EHR in Microsoft products, the spell checker will automatically change it to HER, which is a little annoying for those of us that use EHR frequently. And so I kind of pointed that out in a little bit of an edgy way to Microsoft, hoping to catch their attention. And the one on the right's a little more lighthearted, just saying, hey, I've been more creative working from home during the COVID crisis. The work at home period of time. Has anyone else experienced that? So here I'm kind of expressing opinion, engaging my followers, and I've included some hashtags here on creativity and science Twitter, academic Twitter, which are hashtags used by those communities, and work from home, which is a hashtag commonly used for people talking about working from home. Occasionally repost hits. If you have a tweet from a year ago or 2 years ago that's still relevant today, that was highly retweeted, don't be afraid to dust that off and tweet it again. Here's one that I did from a year ago, and retweeted it, and got some additional notices from it. So it's, that's you don't want to do that too much. Again, people think you're doing too much self-promotion, but occasionally it's okay to dust off a tweet, put it out there again as a way to drive up your follower base and recognition. And finally, number 20, I use TweetDeck, which is a software package, web-based from Twitter. It's tweetdeck.twitter.com, and it's a great way you can organize tweets by users, by hashtags, by keywords, and it's a great way for me to keep track of all the things that I'm interested in. And I have probably 30 or 40 hashtags that I follow, and I can quickly scroll through them and find things that are interesting to me. And also I can schedule tweets to go out. So this is a great way to keep track of the Twitter sphere and make it a little bit easier. That's it. And hope you found these Twitter tips useful. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at morejh if you see this this video, this talk, and have some comments, things to add, things you disagree with, things you want to emphasize. I'm more than happy to hear it. And in the meantime, I will see you on Twitter. Thank you for listening.